You ever wonder how it all ends? What if it ended with a song?
When I first saw Metal Hellsinger, I thought, that looks dope as hell, I have to try it. I never did so because priorities. There's so many games and so little time to play them, and let's be honest, despite that we end up playing the same game all the time anyway. Well, that is when I saw this tweet. That changed things. That instantly put Metal Hellsinger on top of my priorities list. Before I jumped into VR, I decided to play through the flat version of the game just to see how it compares, how the gameplay experience changes with the tacked on VR support. And let me tell you, this game is fire. It is so much fun and got its well-deserved recognition with a strong critical reception, the coveted overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam, and the nomination at the Game Awards for Best Score and Music. And the VR version? It's pretty epic, it's worth it, but it's not without problems. Metal Hellsinger is a rhythm-based first-person shooter. It is basically a mix of Pistol Whip and the Doom reboot games. The most obvious inspiration though comes from bullets per minute or BPM, which looks and plays very similar. But there are some key differences which make Metal Hellsinger stand on its own feet. You play as the Unknown, a lost soul who rampages through different hells to reclaim her stolen voice. Your companion, Paz, a severed skull, acts as the narrator of the game. Brilliantly voiced by Troy Baker, who's probably best known for his performance as Joel in The Last of Us, but beside that has an insane list of credits for voice work in video games and animated shows. After the tutorial there are 8 stages to fight through, each about 15 to 30 minutes long, ending with a boss fight. Each boss is a different aspect of the final boss, the judge. They all look very similar but have different mechanics. During boss fights the game gets a bit of a bullet hell. The structure is very similar to the Doom reboot games. You have combat arenas that get locked down once you enter with a certain amount of enemies spawning in. Between those there are short traversal sections with a lower enemy density. After each stage there are 3 optional combat challenges you can complete to unlock sigils, which give you passive boons. I enjoyed those, they are a nice change of pace for the game. Combat is fast and aggressive, you have a double jump and a dash at your disposal, which you will have to make use of constantly. In contrast to BPM, where you can only perform actions on the beat, here this restriction does not exist. But if you hit your shots on the beat, you will do extra damage and build up your hit streak and fury meter. Hit streaks give you boons at certain thresholds, like a slower decaying fury meter for example, while the fury meter will increase your damage. Each hell has its own music track that is recorded in layers. The higher the fury meter gets, the more layers get added to the music, increasing the intensity. At maximum fury the vocals kick in. Another aspect that I borrowed from Doom is a glory kill system. When an enemy gets low on health, you can perform a glory kill, which is called slaughter here, that will replenish your health. This forces you to play aggressive, to always stay directly in your opponent's business. Slaughters are the only actions that you actually have to do on the beat. Metal Hellsinger is a rhythm game, but it is actually not the rhythm of the music you are playing to. It is rather the rhythm of your arsenal. Each weapon has its own rhythm, determined by fire rate, magazine size and reload speed. The music acts more as a metronome, it sets the speed of the weapon's rhythm. And it's not only the music, the whole world pulsates to the beat. Ammo is unlimited, but most weapons have magazines and you need to reload. If you hit the reload key on a certain beat during the animation, it will shorten your reload time, which is important to keep the rhythm going. The game has a mostly linear structure, with maybe 6 hours of playtime give or take if you do all the challenges. After you beat the game, a new difficulty level unlocks, there are leaderboards for each stage, and there are collectibles that give weapon skins and lore bits, so there's still some stuff to do. I wish there were weapon-based challenges, because there's not really a reason to use different weapons, except the skull maybe that allows you to keep fury up when there are no enemies around. For the most part it's just a matter of preference. Each weapon has its own rhythm that you need to internalize to master it. I feel that an incentive to do so would give the game more longevity, maybe gives the player another unique weapon skin when they master the weapon challenges or something like that. That would be cool. But enough of all that. You are here for VR content, right? You can get the mod from Nexus Mods or the mod's GitHub page. It's free, as these VR mods tend to be. There's a link in the description below. The mod is compatible with the Steam and the Xbox app version of the game. Metal Hellsinger is on Game Pass for PCs, so if you have Game Pass the whole deal is completely free for you. Well, except the cost for the Game Pass subscription obviously. Just download, you will get a zip archive that you need to extract into the game's installation folder. On Steam you will find that by right clicking on the game in your Steam library, manage, browse local files. Can't show you right now how to find it on the Xbox app, but I'm sure you'll figure it out. In the following section I will point out some aspects I did not enjoy about the VR implementation, but let me preface all that with this mod fucking rocks. This game is so much fun on its own, but when you really get into it in VR, the experience gets so intense it's out of this world. The first problem we will have to talk about is performance. The mod's description issues the following information. Metal Hellsinger was not designed for VR and can be quite graphically intensive. Yeah, no kidding. In the flat version I get a solid 70 to 90 FPS with maxed out graphics. That's good enough for me. In VR that dropped down to somewhere between 30 and 40, even with lowering the in-game graphic settings to low. I could barely go above 40 FPS. That's not good enough for a game like this. The only way for me to get somewhat acceptable frame rates was to make heavy use of Helger's VR performance toolkit. With that I got a more or less consistent 60 FPS. That will have to do. If you want to know how that works, I recently made a video about this invaluable tool. I put a link in the description below. You might need it. You might just need it. For reference, I play on an RTX 2070 Super. Still good enough for most games, but unfortunately not for this. And I heard that even with stronger cards, the performance is still rough. I really need to get me a 4090 or something, but I can't afford. Nvidia, don't you want to sponsor me by any chance? The VR version plays very similar to the original game. It's one of these games that just work in VR without much adaptation. The main gameplay change is the addition of motion controls. It's a simple implementation. You aim with your hand and use your trigger to attack. That is perfectly fine for guns, but not so much for other weapons. There is no swing to attack for the sword. Pulling the trigger to attack with the sword that you can swing around always feels off. Having to hit targets to a beat with a sword-like weapon in VR is an outrageous idea, I know. I'm sure that has never been done before, so that would be one thing I would like to see implemented in the future. Another weapon I did not enjoy very much in VR is the Hellcrow. This is a throwing weapon that again felt somewhat off. I really wouldn't know what to do to make it feel better. The guns all work and feel perfectly fine. The hounds are two pistols, but you will only ever shoot from your main hand, so you can't shoot like two different enemies at the same time or something like that. Would be cool if you could aim and fire them independently. Maybe, only maybe, if you want to go the extra mile and really adopt gameplay features to the VR medium, something could be done with the reload mechanics, giving the player a magazine into the offhand while reloading that you would have to shove into the gun on the right beat for the perfect reload could be kind of cool. Wouldn't work with the hounds though, because dual wielding, I don't know, just a thought. All in all, the motion controls feel very good, and they give an extra gameplay layer compared to the flat game. That is important to make the VR version its own thing, to give it its own identity. There are some settings you can tweak for the mod. Unfortunately, there is no in-game menu added for those. That is something I would like to see. To get into the settings, you'll have to edit a config file in your game's install directory. It's under pepinix config livingfray.hellsingervr.config. Let's go through them real quick. To disable VR, set enable to false. There's an option for left-handed play. The VR mod adds a controller vibration on the beats that you can tweak with the following three settings. I turned them off myself by setting the strength to 0 because I found them a bit distracting, but it might be a helpful feature for some. Set disable motion controls to true if you would rather play with a gamepad or M&K. Under locomotion you can set your snap turning angle 0 for smooth turning and choose between head, hand or offhand based movement. Per default the mod disables some post-processing effects for better performance. You can turn that off by setting it to 0, default is 1 and I would recommend using it. It gives a little performance boost and doesn't impact the visual significantly. There's the option to remove all post-processing effects by setting it to 99. That indeed gives a decent performance boost, but yeah, it takes its toll. Your call. Then there are some UI settings. You can make the UI move with your head with the first option. You can set the distance of the menu and the HUD. I found the default values to be perfectly fine. The next three settings are about the reticle/beat indicator you have at the center of the screen in the flat version. You can choose to have it always at the center of the screen, then it would just be a beat indicator. You can have it as a target of your main hand, then it would also work as a reticle, or you can have it at the end of your weapon. The default is target, which would be closest to what we have in the flat game, I guess. The next two options are only applicable if you chose target in the previous setting. This option will have the beat indicator cling to surface you are aiming at, which I found kinda strange, so I turned it off and have it always face a camera. Then you can have the beat indicator scale with the distance of your target. With full it will always appear at the same size on screen, with none it will scale according to distance, and partial is somewhere in between. For a better immersive experience, the mod puts a HUD on your offhand. I actually did not like that, as you have seen in the footage. I like to always have that information available without having to look at my hand, so I turned it off, but it's just a matter of preference. You can set it individually for each HUD element with these 4 settings. You will have to restart the game for any of the settings to take effect. The game is very fast. It has lots of jumping and dashing. I don't mind it. I think it's great actually. I love fast-paced VR games. I'm pretty sure that you can go to the Steam forums for any first-person game and you will find a thread that asks for VR support, and you will always, pretty much always, have people saying, no, this would not work in VR at all, the game is way too fast. Sure enough, these threads exist for Metal Hellsinger. I strongly disagree, sir. There's no such thing as a too fast VR game. Seriously though, if you have problems with motion sickness in fast-paced games, you might want to skip this. I actually had some problems playing this over a longer period of time myself, but that was because of low frame rates and frame drops. That's what gets me. Rhythm games are kind of a staple for VR gaming, but all of these VR rhythm games are stationary, every single one of them. Why nobody got the idea to add movement to the formula is puzzling. By doing so, the gameplay is vastly different from other VR rhythm games. While those create difficulty by increasing complexity and speed of the rhythm, Metal Hellsinger gets away with a constant speed and very simple rhythms by having the player dodge attacks and be mindful of their surroundings. Some enemies push you very aggressively and you need to keep them at a distance. Some will shoot you from afar and you will need to dodge the bullets. Some will just sneak up on you and suddenly be there and you need to prevent that from happening. All things considered, while the VR port plays very similar to the flat version, this is a pretty unique VR experience. There's nothing quite like it on the market. The closest thing is probably Pistol Whip, but with the free movement, jumping and dashing added, it's a completely different beast. I recommend picking this up at any rate. The flat game alone is worth it 100%, but if you're only interested in playing it in VR, then you need a really strong rig to make it run smooth. I ended up spending more time with the flat version just because I could not get the VR version to run good enough. Take these shield guys for example. I like to jump and dash over them to attack them from above. These are the moments when the frame rates tends to tank, and in VR I often just couldn't pull it off. But performance is the only reason really. Apart from that, the VR mod is great, another very unique experience to add to the VR library. I've pointed out some things I think could be added to make it even better. The mod is still in active development, so maybe we'll see some of those points implemented in the future. That is all from me today. Leave a like if you also want Nvidia to give you 4090 and subscribe to the channel for more VR content. See you in the next one.